James, the recruiter, has posted the job listing for the collections administrator. Now he will use ITN Hire to manage candidates through the hiring process and work with Cindy, the hiring manager, to select the best candidate for the position. Let's observe James and Cindy as they move through this process. James is notified by email whenever a candidate completes an application. He can use the email link to navigate directly to the candidate's application. He can also review the applicant dashboard in the ITN Hire at any time. This dashboard displays all candidates for all positions. He can use a filter to display only the collections administrator candidates. As part of the application process, candidates answer a series of questions that were created by the HR department. These questions help to determine how closely the candidate matches the qualities that have been identified as important for success in this specific position. Each question is worth an assigned number of points. Candidates receive a final score based on their answers. The maximum number of points will vary by position, but the closer the candidate comes to scoring the maximum number of points, the better suited they are for the position. The MET BQ column indicates whether the candidates meet the basic qualifications for the position. The average rating column displays the average reviewer star rating for each candidate. Reviewers or hiring managers select a rating from 1 to 5 stars, with 5 stars being the ideal candidate. Your company will define exactly how the star rating system is used. The candidate's status displays in the final column. Statuses are used to indicate where the candidate is in the hiring process. We'll talk more about statuses when we review an application. The first candidate on the list has a high score, which indicates a good match for the position. Let's follow along while James reviews this application. Since we just discussed the candidate score, let's look at the Job Questions tab first. Here you can see the candidate's answer and score for each question. Next is the Assessments tab. If your company has additional assessments for the position, you can select them here and invite the candidate. Note that it is a best practice to invite the candidate to take the assessment in person on a company-issued computer. If your company is set up to run background or drug screens, you can request and view results on this tab. ITN Hire offers more than 50 behavioral, cognitive, and skill-based tests through the Selective Hiring Assessment integration. You can select a pre-built test, or your company can create a customized assessment specific to your organization. Let's return to the Applications tab. You can view the candidate summary, prior experience, resume, and references. Different information may be available based on how the candidate applied. Note that you can download or preview the candidate's resume. After reviewing the candidate's application, James updates the application status. As we mentioned earlier, application statuses are used to track where the candidate is in the hiring process. Your company's application statuses are assigned based on their hiring process steps. This is an important part of the ITN Hire initial setup process. James updates the status to reflect that he has reviewed the application. Next, James wants to schedule a phone interview. He uses the Send Message feature. The Send Message feature has a variety of templates available to communicate with the candidate. James selects the Interview Request template. You can customize the templates as needed, and then send as a text or an email. Note that you must use paid credits when sending as a text. James schedules a phone interview with the candidate and updates the status accordingly. During the phone interview, James uses the Notes feature to take notes while he speaks to the candidate. This feature is extremely useful to help you remember important information from each candidate conversation. You can also add notes for other reviewers or hiring managers. Based on the candidate's application, score, and phone interview, James believes that he is a good match for the position. Now he wants to send the application to Cindy, the hiring manager, using the Spotlight feature. Cindy will receive a notification to review the candidate's application. James follows Andy's application so that he will be notified of any activity. Later, he receives a notification that Cindy has added a note. Cindy's note indicates that she would like to interview the candidate, so it's time for James to schedule the in-person interview. Note that in some organizations, the hiring manager will communicate with the candidate and schedule interviews. At James's company, hiring managers and reviewers enter notes for the recruiter, who handles the scheduling and candidate communications. James sends the candidate an in-person interview request and updates the application status. While Andy is in the interviewing stages, James manages other candidates using the same process. If he determines that a candidate is not qualified for the position, he updates their application status. He also frequently uses the Actions feature. If your company uses the Status Checklist feature, you'll find required steps that your hiring team must check off before an applicant can reach hired status. If the applicant hasn't completed an application yet, you can send it here. If you think that the candidate would be well suited to another open position, you can copy his or her application to another job. As we saw earlier, you can schedule a calendar event for calls and interviews. If the candidate sent a document that you want included in the application, you can attach it here. You can view all notes that have been added to the application here. If the candidate's application is no longer active, you can archive it here. Use the Share Application via Email feature to send to someone outside of ITN Hire. Use the Spotlight application to another user option to send to an ITN Hire user. James gets a notification that a note has been added to Andy's application. The hiring manager's note indicates that she wants to do a second interview with her team. After messaging the candidate and determining a time for the team interview, James schedules a calendar event for the interview attendees. He completes and saves the event, which is then added to the selected attendees' event calendar. After Andy's second interview, James views the notes and sees that Cindy and her team are ready to move forward with hiring. Notice that Andy has scored a 5-star average review, which indicates he is an excellent fit for the position. It's time to send the offer letter. And update the status. Finally, Andy accepts the job offer. James welcomes him to the company and updates his status to hired in the system. Later, once Andy has started his new position, James uses the ITN Hire communication inbox to send onboarding surveys that allow Andy to share his experience as a new employee.